Hello and welcome to another edition of Bangladesh Today. We have with us in our studio Sankarshan Thakur, Roving Editor of the Telegraph newspaper. Sankarshan has reported extensively on politics, international relations, conflicts and tragedies, both natural and man-made. Today we discuss Bangladeshi politics and its role in South Asia, a country that is slowly stabilizing its democratic foundations. Sankarshan, in the years since independence, Bangladesh has managed to kind of establish itself now as a moderate Islamic nation with its democratic credentials intact. It's had its ups and downs, but it seems to have gone over the crux. Do you think that's a fair, reading of what Bangladesh is today?
Well, more or less, but you'd hesitate to come to any sort of final conclusions on where Bangladesh has arrived. I think their record in recent years in terms of strengthening democratic roots, in terms of having governments that are completing their terms, is something that encourages us. But to say that it has come to a position of stability that the neighbors at least can be assured of and secure of, I'm not sure that has happened yet. I think that's a work in progress, and I think we'll have to watch out for what happens in the future. I mean, elections in Bangladesh can throw up radically opposite governments into power.
But they did have free and fair elections the last time round.
Of course they did, and the mandate was huge. It was the kind of mandate that Hasina Wajid's party was not even expecting at that time, and therefore the burden on her and her party to perform became that much bigger.
Yeah.
But to say that another election in Bangladesh can throw up a radically different political party into power, and then everything begins to change, not just the politics of it, but how the street behaves, how the voices that come into prominence on the street, in the intelligentsia, which is why I'm saying that Bangladesh is still sort of struggling is probably too strong a word to use, but it is still sort of swinging between very radical bipolarities. I think a moderate space in the polity in Bangladesh has not been achieved yet.
You don't think that?
No,
if you see, it's either one party or the other, with the army standing there just waiting, inching for somebody to fall through or else stage a coup. Sure. I mean, they did that a couple of months back. They did try it. To do that. It didn't work out. Now, do you think that if at all the army does attempt a coup, would it have a kind of a popular support? Because it seems as if Bangladeshis have kind of reconciled to the idea or are open to the idea of now walking the path of democracy and nothing else.
No, the sense of I get of meeting Bangladeshis here as visitors in international fora is that they are very, very proud of what they have achieved in terms of becoming a democratic state and a democratic people, and would like to make their choices through the vote rather than having the army dictate terms to them. So I think as a people and as a society, there are strong resistances to an army takeover. But then again, I'd put a caveat there, and I say it's nothing that can be ruled out happening in Bangladesh. Such reversals, I mean, I can't say 100% it will not happen, which is why I say that I think democracy and the strengthening of democratic roots in that country is a work in progress. It's going in the right direction, but I don't think it has arrived where it needs to arrive.
See, for decades it was ignored by the Western world, and now there seems to be a grudging respect from the United States, from the Western world towards where Bangladesh is today, and its difficult and its perilous path to keep away Islamic radical elements within its polity. Isn't it? Isn't that true? I mean,
I think the attention Bangladesh has got recently from the West, there are two aspects to it. One, of course, is this post 9/11 fear that these countries could become bases for either Al-Qaeda activity or Islamic extremism, jihadi activity. The two, and I think to my mind, no less important is markets, labor. Bangladesh is a huge emerging market. Bangladesh is a huge, I'm sad to say this, huge sweatshop for Western multinational companies. So I think to keep the market going and these labor sweatshops going, I think you need to pay these societies some attention.
But flip side to it is yes. I mean, even if it's because of the economics, at least some good deed gets done.
Absolutely, and the attention will flow to Bangladesh in Bangladesh's direction, because I'm not sure how many, 4 or 5 years ago, it was in a very, very perilous state when reports were coming out, even on Indian soil, of terror activity being sourced out of Bangladesh, of these sleeper cells functioning out of Bangladesh, which was like a country that had not been noticed so prominently in terms of what sort of safe havens it could provide to terrorist activities. So I think that perilous moment has been passed.
But those safe havens still exist. I mean, of course, there is cooperation, increased level of cooperation between intelligence agencies of both countries, between security agencies of both countries, whereby we are able to curb, Northeast rebels taking solace there and stuff like that, taking protection out there. But in spite of that, whenever there are terror attacks on Indian soil, there are linkages to Huji, and there are linkages that one finds out there. That Sheikh Hasina hasn't really been able to crack down heavily on these elements within her own country, isn't it?
It's not so easily done, Smita. I mean, she has a huge domestic constituency to look after, and that constituency, from the voices that keep coming out of that constituency, that street is an angry Islamic street too. There is a party there, which is her opposition, which is very willing to pay heed to these voices. In fact, it is not averse to using these voices to make lost political ground. So she has, it's a very tricky battle you do. I mean, if you knock them too much, they might come back to you with a force that you might not be able to resist. So it's sort of easy for us to say she hasn't been able to tackle them hard or properly enough. One, it takes time. Two, I think because she is a politician and not a military dictator, and I'm happy that she's a politician, she will, a democratic leader's hands are tied in terms of dealing with these forces. You are working through the rule of law. You're not working through an army or a police state.
Right.
So I think to that extent, your sort of fight against them does get a bit hamstrung.
Do you think that the government in Bangladesh has dealt with this aspect of Islamic Jihad elements in their country in a more mature manner as compared to the other countries in our neighborhood, say Pakistan or Afghanistan, or was the level of threat lesser in Bangladesh, so it's been easier for her?
The Pakistan-Afghanistan front is a very difficult one to tackle. But having said that, I think the way in which the Bangladeshi government has handled it has been maturer, has been sort of more dexterous in terms of handling them. But you also have, if you're drawing parallels with Pakistan, I think the key difference is how well entrenched the army and the ISI still remain in Pakistan in terms of their interventionist, determinist sort of ways of behaving and affecting how the country, what the country does, what the country doesn't do, how the politicians behave, what they. So I have a sense that that drawback does not exist in Bangladesh with the elected leadership.
The Bangladesh army would like it, but
would like it, but there is a groundswell that I think protects the government from these things.
Is that a cultural thing in Bangladesh? Is it because of the Bengali culture, being something which runs very strong, and the Islamic culture is kind of runs parallel with it? It's not as if that runs over the Bengali culture. Is that it? Is it that two forms of culture which?
Were I to reply to that, what would I be saying about Punjabi culture?
Okay.
No, seriously.
I got it.
This is very tricky ground.
Okay.
I know that there is a very, very deep cultural aspect to Islam that is practiced in Bangladesh in terms of their pride with the language, their pride with the food they eat, the pride with how they conduct themselves socially. But equally, in Pakistan, Punjabiyat determines a whole lot of
no,
Islam.
see, maybe I didn't explain the question properly. I think what I'm trying to say is that the Bangladeshi first sees himself as a Bengali, and then he sees himself as a Muslim.
I'm not too sure.
No,
I'm not too
that's
sure.
not how it
No.
works.
No, it may work with some people, but I'm not sure it works across the board as the fundamental identity being Bengali.
Which is why the attack recently on the Buddhist temples and the Hindu temples.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at least there are very powerful forces in that country which would not like that the interplay of identities, cultural and religious, to be dominated by the cultural rather than the religious. And I'm not sure you could say in black and white that in Bangladesh, cultural identity or the Bengali identity is superior to their Islamic identity. I don't think
it's not superior. It's not in conflict.
It may be in conflict, but if you put it in conflict, I don't think Bangladesh can run. You know, I do not think you can use either or. They're interlinked, deeply interlinked, and I think at some times their cultural identity comes to the fore. At others, the Islamist identity comes to the fore.
When Sheikh, we were talking about elections in
Yes.
Bangladesh, and now it's going to be, she's going to try for another term.
Yes.
Now, when she came in last time, it was with an overwhelming majority, and there were two things that she promised. One was the war trials, and the second was to improve relations with India and China. How far do you think that has she been successful, and does she still have that mandate with the people, and has she delivered on that?
You know, the war trials thing is hugely cathartic in society. It's going to open wounds that many people would think, let sleeping dogs lie. So it's a difficult effort. It is on, and I think it's a deeply courageous thing for her to have done, because like the Truth Commission in South Africa, you need to deal with these issues of the past.
And you need closure.
Closure. You know, you need to get over them rather than them simmering away in society. In terms of building relations, here's a tricky one. You know, here in India, we keep saying this government is good for us, good relations with us. You know, Hasina being in power is good. There's a trap there. You know, the moment India starts saying she's good, we are queering her home pitch, because then her opposition gets on and then starts saying, you know, if this woman is sold out to India, what are we doing her with electing her as a leader?
Right.
Let us elect a Bangladeshi nationalist who will fight for Bangladeshi rights. So I think to some extent, I think we should contain our enthusiasm about her for our own good. Because if we start sort of tom-tomming her too much, then she loses ground at home.
And that
I think that's a point she's made at home once or twice, that, you know, I don't want to be seen as some agent of India or you know.
And that happened because when Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh went there into 2011, and there was this India-Bangladesh Accord, even then she was accused hell of a lot of being too close to India and being an Indian agent.
And taking that huge cachet of money and
so
as if it was a personal bribe.
So there was all this talk.
By the way, that was the first bilateral visit the Prime Minister made to a neighboring country. And I think that is deeply significant. I know because
he went to Bhutan, but that was part of SAARC.
He's been to Sri Lanka, for instance, but that's been multilateral visits. I know Teesta didn't happen during that time because of our own domestic compulsions. I hear now that with Mamta gone from the alliance, there could be some fast tracking of the Teesta Accord. I know there are genuine concerns on both sides, but I think when the government of India decided to do a deal on the Teesta River, the government of India would have taken care of concerns on this side. So I think, you know, India does need to behave like the big neighbor on land and water, and these are land and water are going to be the two most fought over issues in the times to come. These are very, very
more magnanimous. You think that because we are the larger nation, we have to be magnanimous towards all our neighbors, and especially towards lower riparian countries.
Yes, lower riparian countries you have to be, if not magnanimous, at least reasonable with.
Do you think that it's going to, relationship with India, so far everybody says that it's basically India's put all its eggs in one basket. We've just gone with Sheikh Hasina. Do you think that the relationship has matured to the extent that now, it's going to be bipartisan support towards India in Bangladesh?
Well, one would hope so, because you are talking about Bangladesh, you're not talking about the BNP or the Awami League. You are talking a country, you're not talking political parties, and that's the point I was making earlier, is that we need to be seen as people who are dealing with the elected representatives of the Bangladeshi people, whoever they are. And I think if we, putting your eggs in one basket or seen to be putting your eggs in one basket is going to hurt us, eventually, because you don't want a country in your neighborhood sort of turning rabidly against you, angry against you, so angry that, things happen along the borders, which they do happen. We need to contain those things. So, which is why I was saying it's a bit of a trap when we start being seen as friendly to one party and not friendly to the other one, because I think as nations we need to deal with other nations.
When the Indian Prime Minister went to Bangladesh, there was this whole talk of the states, the Indian states which are around Bangladesh. The chief ministers of these states said that involve us when you deal with neighboring nations. Is that the right way to go about it? Because, then where do you stop? Because when you deal with Sri Lanka, then Tamil Nadu will turn around and say, hey, involve us. And then when you deal with Pakistan, there's going to be, why not Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister? Why not the Punjab Chief Minister? So is that the right way to go about it, to get the chief ministers of the neighboring states also involved when it comes to international relations?
That's not how we've done business with neighbors as yet. But, ideas evolve, and I don't see something terribly wrong with involving chief ministers. After all, they are the chief executives of, running affairs in a state which have borders with this country or that. And people have linkages across most borders. In the Northeast, more than anywhere else, the chief ministers want to get involved because each or many of them, the majority of them, have the illegal immigration problem.
Exactly.
And those create domestic problems for them in their respective states.
Yeah.
And they are struggling with many kinds of mechanisms, legal and administrative, in order to come to grips with this problem. So if say the Assam chief minister wants to be involved, I think he's justified in saying that I want to be involved because look, here is a huge border I have with them. Here I have a domestic constituency of mine which is complaining about this and that or the other. We need to sort this out. I do not think there's anything, I think, we can evolve a mechanism in which chief ministers who, they're as much Indians as the Indian Prime Minister.
Sure,
for example,
but we've never used them at the time of negotiations, at the time of talks, and one saw that that was a major issue when it came to Teesta.
Yeah, it was, and I think Mamata Banerjee also played politics over Teesta, because I know for a fact that for a long time she knew what the agreement was, and then suddenly she decides to play this angry. She was on the delegation. And then no chief minister gets onto the delegation without knowing what we are going to do. And at the 11th hour, she throws a tantrum and walks out of the trip. So there is that element of Mamata's typical brand of sort of politics as well involved. But per se, as when international negotiations take place, there's a whole lot that happens. The backside of negotiations. There is no harm in involving your involved chief minister and saying, look, here's a delegation level talk happening. Why don't you come and put your ideas on the table? What's the harm? And then when a trip happens and the prime minister is visiting and you have 6 or 2 or 1 chief minister accompanying you, that's just the symbolic sort of ballast you carry along, saying, look, I have 6 chief ministers from states that neighbor you,
and
who
here
are,
they
who
are
with me.
And he did, I think there was one chief minister that who accompanied
Tarun
Gogoi went. That's right. Yeah, so he was
you know, it just brings a symbolic solidity to that trip.
Yeah.
But I think back end or at any stage of negotiations that people think fit. I mean, chief ministers are also elected representatives. They have a say. They have people to govern. They have borders to mind.
These talks that are going to continue on.
I'm not saying bring them on a bilateral, because those talks are structured.
Yeah.
But there's always room for talks. Politicians talk anywhere. You and I know that.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Sankarshan.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Didn't work out. Now, do you think that if at all the army does attempt a coup, would it have a kind of a popular support? Because it seems as if Bangladeshis have kind of reconciled to the idea or are open to the idea of now walking the path of democracy and nothing else.
No, you know, the sense of I get of meeting Bangladeshis here as visitors in international fora is that they are very, very proud of what they have achieved in terms of becoming a democratic state and a democratic people, and would like to make their choices through the vote rather than having the army dictate terms to them. So I think as a people and as a society, there are strong resistances to an army takeover. But then again,
Sankarshan, in the years since independence, Bangladesh has managed to kind of establish itself now as a moderate Islamic nation with its democratic credentials intact. It's had its ups and downs, but it seems to have gone over the crux. Do you think that's a fair reading of what Bangladesh is today?
Well, more or less, but you'd hesitate to come to any sort of final conclusions on where Bangladesh has arrived. I think their record in recent years in terms of strengthening democratic roots, in terms of having governments that are completing their terms, is something that encourages us. But to say that it has come to a position of stability that the neighbors at least can be assured of and secure of, I'm not sure that has happened yet. I think that's a work in progress, and I think we'll have to watch out for what happens in the future. I mean, you know, elections in Bangladesh can throw up radically opposite governments into power.
But they did have free and fair elections the last time round.
Of course they did, and the mandate was huge. It was the kind of mandate that that Hasina Wajid's party was not even expecting at that time, and therefore the burden on her and her party to perform became that much bigger.
Yeah.
But to say that, you know, another election in Bangladesh can throw up a radically different.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Bangladesh Today. We have with us in our studio Sankarshan Thakur, roving editor of the Telegraph newspaper. Sankarshan has reported extensively on politics, international relations, conflicts and tragedies, both natural and man-made. Today we discuss Bangladeshi politics and its role in South Asia, a country that is slowly stabilizing its democratic foundations.
Political party into power, and then everything begins to change, not just the politics of it, but how the street behaves, how, you know, the voices that come into prominence on the street, in the intelligentsia, which is why I'm saying that Bangladesh is still sort of struggling is probably too strong a word to use, but it is still sort of swinging between very radical bipolarities. I think a moderate space in the polity in Bangladesh has not been achieved yet. You
no,
go from,
you don't think that?
No,
I
no,
mean,
no.
if you see, it's either one party or the other, with the army standing there just waiting, inching for somebody to fall through or else stage a coup. I mean, they did that a couple of months back. They did try to do that.